to confirm,
Right.
this committee will be meeting Monday. Our goal is we have to finish this budget by next Friday, a week from tomorrow. In order to get us time to do the conference committee with the House and meet our adjournment deadline. So Monday at 11 o'clock, and we'll send a Zoom link for those people that want to meet remotely. So we're down to the bottom of 116.
Yes.
502 education.
This is
This
in
is
every
the
year.
formula grants.
Yeah.
So we'll just,
And then 503 is just defining.
state place
place.
students, and that deals with the one center. So that they qualify for education funding.
So that's good.
That's a one we have in. Flexible pathways.
And this is what, how much is, the sub-A of this is the high school completion piece versus the early college and the other pieces of flexible pathways. So we're still trying to find out from AOE on the double piece of
Why
high school
that
completion.
level of
Yeah.
support has gone down. So we have the request out there, a reminder. But the rest is,
the various other pieces of flexible pathways, which is the half of dual enrollment, the early college, and the pieces you see.
What's the virtual high school?
Virtual high school?
yeah,
Oh, you can take classes virtually. Certain classes in certain areas.
online.
That high school or
Yeah.
college?
Well, it's high school students, but,
Could be college level courses.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I don't, when people talk about, what the support that we provide for college education here, the real sleeper here is number 4, where our seniors, our high school seniors can have their first year of college paid for free
well,
tuition. And I think that is it.
if you add it to dual enrollment, it's a year and a half.
Yeah.
So, it's, but the funny thing is I've done some talks at high schools about this. Nobody is getting to work. They don't know about early college. They don't know about dual enrollment. So the personalized learning plan is supposed to be an opportunity for all that advising to be
I
done.
don't think the full potential of that concept has been realized.
Well, why aren't high schools required, or somebody should be required, and if they don't do it, take money away?
Well, they are required, but what they do is they basically give students a set of requirements, and they tell them when you graduate, you're gonna have to have these things in a folder. And then they have advisories, but the advisories, when they meet, don't really do anything with the personalized learning plans, they do other things. And then when they get to their senior year, they hurriedly, my dog is in the process of
I've heard it.
about 2 years of worksheet.
So I'm going to suggest we hold until we get information back as to why that level of support up to our adult basic education who are helping kids get their high school diploma has declined. So because they're in here, the House has given them 1.5 million to make up for the what is they historically a few years ago were receiving from Agency of Education. So I'm going to say A is on hold pending information, and the other amounts I think are just based on actual experience, right?
This is section 504.
Yeah,
Yes.
B, notwithstanding.
He is in that.
And C is for dual enrollment on the page
Yes,
20.
that's the general fund piece of it.
Yeah.
You have the fund piece.
We
with the-
split it, yeah. And then teachers' retirement.
This is the
Standard.
standard with the updated numbers, and I don't know if those have changed at all.
Yeah, okay. And the
Am I
one,
reading that correctly? 194 million?
What you are. Yes.
yes,
Wonder if they're aware of that when they write it.
teachers?
On
Well, I don't know, they probably don't. But the one thing that we have to point out when we're talking about retirement is the financial package that we put together to deal with the underfunding of our pension programs to get us to where we need to be by 2038. Included, remember last year, we made a substantial one-time payment to help address the underfunding, it was 200 million. And by doing that, we reduced the debt, the cost of our amortized liability payment. And we, in our construct, used those savings of that lower payment that was derived from making that big contribution to be the plus on the normal ADEC. Now, the retirees, not the retirees, but the teachers and the state employees said, we will make concessions, we will pay higher, we will make some concessions around when the COLA kicks in, et cetera. But we want for the state to make an additional payment on top of the annual ADEC. And the commitment was we calculated 9 million this year, max is out at 15. So the money to pay that amortized liability has been in the base. The governor's proposed budget uses one-time money for that plus payment that we are obligated to pay between now and 2038. So we have got an ongoing obligation that is part of that retirement construct that is fairly ongoing between now and 2038. And that has been replaced, that base money ongoing that's really required to meet that commitment has been replaced with one-time money. So if we say that's an ongoing commitment, it's not a one-time obligation. We have an $18 million pressure on base spending. So the House did not address that.
They have the $18 million in their total budget, but they left it in the one-time
Well,
position.
that's what I'm saying. They did not address the fact that they left it one time. So if we recognize that that is not something that's going to go away next year, but it is going to be there until 2038.
It's actually going to step up by $3 million.
Yeah, then to use one time is contrary to the whole premise that we have heard repeatedly, and we have been admonished to remember, is that we don't use one-time money for ongoing obligations. I'm going to put it bluntly. And so I think we need to be very cautious, and we're going to have to look at how we do that, because I do think that that is something that is not one time. And so that's going to obviously put a different perspective on what we have for base spending in this building. But 18 million ongoing and going up, that if you haven't accommodated in your base and recognizing it's ongoing, we're repeating the sins of the past, to put it bluntly. So I've made my spiel in terms of what is being proposed here, what the House did, what commitment we made when we set up that underfunding scenario and the legislation that we passed to get us to where we need to be. I'm not going to be sitting here at the end of this table in 2038. I can assure you of that. But if you've got an obligation, it's not going to go away. And next year, we don't know how much one-time money. We have been told we need to use our one-time money in a way that gives us long-term investments from return. But using one-time for base is part of what's happening here. And it means that we're starting out in a very different place when everybody says, we want to have our funding in base, because that way we can, then we can get it. And so we have many programs that are wanting to be moved from one time to base. This is an example of moving a base expenditure to one time. And I realize I'm looking at, he's looking at me, but I'm honest. For those of us who spent, and Chris Rue and Stephanie had the pleasure of spending the December putting together what was a package that moved us forward on this. I'm not very anxious to move backwards on it.
So we're gonna hold this until we
No,
figure
no,
out.
no, I'm just telling you that we have $18 million less of base money available. If we fulfill this commitment, than what the governor was saying he had and what the House is using.
This budget's 9 this year with 18 later.
9 for each.
9
Oh,
for
right,
each
each
system,
one, right.
and then it will grow by $6 million.
To max out
$6
at-
million, and it will max out at 15 per system.
So,
Stay at that.
so I just wanted to alert the committee that,
We got a expenditure that we can't afford.
we've got an
We can afford it.
obligation that we have to meet.
Obligation.
We have an obligation that we have to meet. Because those pension obligations don't go away. No. And, I know, we're not studying.
I just got this paper I wanted to study.
So, anyway, I just want to raise that, because people need to understand, how some of this budget got constructed. And, and so, so when we're getting into making, and the reason I'm saying it is because when we get into all the requests that people have, this is, gonna have to be at the top of the list. And it means that that base decision is gonna be much more difficult for us than the House, if we in fact recognize that.
So what's gonna happen with this, once we bailed it out with last year, and now we're using one-time money to keep it going. But what's gonna happen when the one-time money is no longer
I think what
coming
the
in?
chair is saying
The chair-
is
the
we're
chair is
doing
saying-
this in base and we're not doing it in one time.
And in fact, that was how it was set up, that we would take the money that we otherwise had in the base that we would have to pay on debt service. And by making that 200 million, it freed up the money to fund the base. That would be the plus that goes with the ADEC. And I realize this gets really kind of complicated, but it was part of our commitment for the concessions that employees are made around pension design. And so if we hadn't agreed with that, we would have had to make that payment. And so we were starting with, what are we paying now, what's in the base, and how can we work within it to address and put forward a plan to address our underfunding. And the other part was to start pre-funding our healthcare benefits, which never had been pre-funded. They were all pay-go, which is pretty expensive. So I'm gonna move on, but it's just, I'm just giving you a heads up around the constraints we're gonna have as a committee when we start getting into the money. So on that happy note, let's keep going here.
So I'm still on page 118, 514.1. This is the intent language around the
Yes, this is
revision
around,
of the code.
okay,
Just
now,
saying.
committee, this is something that I'm also gonna bring you up to date on. And that is, we all got emails from our teachers around the amount of the COLA, the cost of living adjustment under. And we met with NEA, and what what was the issue here was back in 2016, the methodology to calculate the COLA was changed. And it was done at the time when there actually was a deflation and the benefit would have gone down. So the language that was added protected the benefit from being reduced, but at the time, it was an uppermost inflation cap of 5%. For 30 years, we didn't have inflation that exceeded 5%. Last year we did. And so that agreement made back in 2016 got forgotten because it just wasn't ever really real. So in meeting with NEA, there are two things here, one of which is an agreement that we would make the difference in a one-time benefit, not do a base benefit adjustment, the difference between the 2.5 and the 3.8, which would have been the 50%. Unlike state employees, teachers get only 50% of the COLA. The state employees have 100%. So there's in here is a $3 million appropriation to make that one-time payment for this year, which is obviously is one time, and then a commitment to, when we do the experience study next year, and that's what will be where we will look at what were the assumptions, what were including the return on investment, inflation, et cetera, and to fund the reversion back to the pre-2016 methodology, which would be 50% of the cost of living. So there is going to have to be, and you will see this in the EO bill, and that is fencing off payment into the teachers' retirement fund to address that methodology change. And if we did not, we would create an underfunding, which
And we can actually add it some E here without intent to include the ed fund.
I think so.
Or we could also support.
Yeah, because the ed fund is going to have to, that's a teacher's expenditure. So that's another discussion that we've had relative to the COLA and the surprise that many of our retired teachers had when they didn't get the 3.8. So I think that's about the two big pieces on pensions.
So you got a new section.
So we have a whole new section that deals with that supplemental payment. And then we have the
On the bottom.
cost analysis, the experience study that will then determine not only the cost of going back to the methodology, but we'd also have a revision of our ADEC, which is our annual contribution. So we can add some language here, but this is something that was negotiated with the House and NEA and Pro Tem's office and myself.
And then on the bottom of page 120 is the one-time payment.
Yeah, which is the 3 million that I referenced.
That is due to,
Retired teachers.
but it's,
It's the difference between the 2.5 and the 3.8. Right now, they're capped at 50% they're capped at 5%, 50% of 5% uppermost. This is the difference between, which was 2.5 versus the 3.8, which would have been 50% of the actual COLA. So that gets us down to the bottom of 120. And this is the language on the retirement fund, and this is to put us back to, this is the language that's necessary because we found out that what they wanted to do wasn't technically feasible, and it was, and maybe Stephanie, you can explain, but Chris can explain. We used a much more simplified method last year, and the teachers wanted to have a more calibrated contribution schedule depending on compensation, and it turned out to be unworkable by the schools. And so So basically, they're agreeing with our original proposed methodology, which was, they could administer it and it was more straightforward. But we had said, if you can make it work, we'll do this for 1 year. It's expedient, it's simple. Come back to us. They came back and said, it just wasn't workable. We just want to continue how we did it this year. Chris, did I do all
I
right on
think you
that?
did excellent, Madam Chair. The only thing I would add is the treasurer's office proposed this language in response to the report that came out and costed out these rates with the actuaries. And they're expected to yield the same amount of revenue as sort of the originally envisioned marginal structure that would be repealed and replaced by this language.
So we'll just move on unless you want to get glazed over more with new requirements.
At the bottom of 124, top of page 125, we now do an ADEC for the OPEB, and that's what's the statement there in section 515. And now we're into higher ed.
Okay. Right, well, we only have 50 more pages to go. This is just how we pay the University of Vermont. This is standard language.
The 112,000.
Why do we pay the university?
Well, because that's your alma mater. We're
Oh,
doing it in your
Well, that's
honor.
right.
We are putting football back this year.
I know, but
They haven't lost a game since what,
Yeah.
1973 or something?
Well, once they lost a month,
yeah.
So I do think you have to have 602, the state college piece on hold, because I think you have made a decision and I'm not quite sure that it was, what the House passed was 50% tuition reduction, so the page 126 and P 602.1.
Well, wait a minute. On page 125,
Okay.
section E 602, that it just has to do the warrants. I'm assuming that's okay.
Yes.
So now we're moving on to 602.1.
And I think you want to make your money decisions and then we'll revisit this section.
Yeah, so we'll hold. And we have a lot here, don't we?
And the allied health pieces are always in, speaking to the global commitment piece of the flow on the allied health program.
So 603 is okay. There's no 604.
That probably used to be Vermont Public Television or something. Or Vermont Interactive Television or something.
All right, VSAC. Yes,
Program.
they're a good program. And this is language we've had before, right?
Yeah,
Allowing
it's the 25 is the, that trust fund, I think, is the for foster children. And then in A, and then we cap them at 7% on the admin. I don't usually use the full 7%.
up to 6.
It's a 6 here.
Up to 6.
can I ask how those two sentences reconcile? It says, may be used for staff expenses associated with the administrative funds. Funds shall not be used for indirect costs. But wouldn't some of those administration funds be indirect?
No, I bet it doesn't allow cost allocation of maybe the executive director's salary and so forth. I think,
But I mean,
Rent.
yeah.
okay. So by definition, then a staff expense is a direct cost. And anything else. Okay.
Yeah, if you start cost allocating all through for everything,
No,
we wouldn't have much to.
And you don't cost allocate.
And this has been in here before.
There's good stuff. More
So,
on there.
So
And this was not in place there, but
601, 5.1,
when they came in and testified, they had language that they wanted to add.
and which
Was it, and did they get you that language then?
I will go look, I think it was in their packet.
Yeah, I think it
For
was.
what, dual enrollment or what?
No, for BSEC generally, because I'm not sure if it's fit right here or here.
I'll check, I'm drawing a blank on it, sorry.
Okay, I think they also sent it to Phil.
Phil?
I didn't get it, I think.
I'll try.
Okay.
605.1 is the stipend, they administer the stipend, the dual enrollment stipend.
Well, we like that because we want to make sure kids that come from families that don't have the means can access the program. So this is something this committee put in a number of years ago, recognizing that we want to assure equal access by these students. So we're agreeing with ourselves. Clean Heat Homes.
This is the new program we heard about from A&R. It goes to the EIC. There is federal congressionally directed spending to the Clean Heat Home program as well. So this would be, it's in the list of expenditures.
Centers use.
How is this different from the weatherization program that we also?
Weatherization is through OEO. This is
Yeah, but
EIC.
it's
It
like
might be a higher
duplication.
income, it might be a
Yes.
higher income.
It's a little bit higher.
Yeah.
For those that aren't eligible for the weatherization system.
Who is the Vermont?
Well, they aren't eligible for this. I would think they.
This program is only for those that aren't eligible for weatherization, but are less than 120.
It's a band, it's a band above weatherization, but still have very limited income. So it's
And-
designed.
Weatherization is just weatherization. This allows for fossil fuel heating system displacement, wiring of their panel,
The whole home.
that's why they call it home, because it could be weatherization, but it could be anything else that they need.
We should change the name of it.
So this
Yeah.
language, I
Doesn't
believe
that
the 3 million is one time. for the PC
Still,
home. And so, but this language makes it sound like it's in the base part of A&R. So we may want to move this language to be with the one-time money.
This is general, but there, because wasn't there ARPA money for this program?
ARPA money was for the healthy homes, which is the on-site, failed
Oh,
on-site
failed
septic and water.
I thought there was some ARPA money. Well, we call both, that was called whole home. Which I think maybe they wanted to continue the program, maybe.
Is the 3 million from what, general fund?
It's 3 million.
Yes.
So that would be part of our discussion around what we fund and the level. Is this a new?
It's new, it's a new general fund program, and I don't recall whether or not state matching would be required for the congressionally directed spending. That's I'm not clear on.
Well, depends on where it comes from.
It's in the, I can't remember if it's Leahy or Sanders, like the congressionally directed.
Not to be confused with the clean.
I think it's $8.5 million.
No, it's Clean Heat Standard.
What would be good on any of this stuff, that these different programs, is they should have to report back a little bit. I mean, you know, on what they have accomplished, and because we're just getting started throwing millions at clean heat standards, and we don't get a report back on some type of a regular schedule, we aren't gonna have,
Well, we do from the weatherization program.
well, yes, they've always done
Yeah.
well, but
Most
this
of them
is a whole,
finished their work.
I think, different
On
program.
that
Oh,
bill.
on S5, no, they haven't.
So they, we don't know what they
But
got.
this is not S5, this isn't the Clean
No,
Heat
no, this is
Standard.
not-
These
this
don't
is
go
a-
to
I
this.
just said it was a bad name though.
Yeah, for that reason.
Yeah, it should be something else.
One homes program.
Well, look into it's good.
Really?
I want to know how it correlates with the whole home program.
Why don't we hold it and we are, if we, we're gonna put it on our one times, it's 3 million, it's a new program.
So I think the governor has 5 million, and the House did 3 million.
So Andy, if you could check to see what whole home, maybe the House did half a home.
But the secretary was very clear that it was that sort of whole home approach, that all the pieces.
So, with Andy, you'll take and see if you can.
What about thermal, geothermal drilling? How come that's not any
It could be if it's replacing a fossil fuel heating system, then it would qualify.
But if you're drilling a well for thermal, that's pretty expensive. If you have in-ground thermal as opposed to heat pumps.
You said your advanced wood was 20, 30,000.
Yeah,
Wouldn't cost you more than 20 or
To
30,000.
drill a couple wells.
No, I doubt it.
Depends on how many dry holes you have.
That's what you gotta have, right? Didn't you say you need dry holes?
No. That was Scott Beck said that that's how he did his system.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Scott did his.
The
Yeah,
chauffeur.
but he built his house new, and so he designed it in as part of the construction. But he didn't use heat pumps. No, he used in-ground. We're gonna hold that, and Andy's gonna help us understand how it fits. And now we're down to E900, and that just excludes the reversions from being subject to the 5% reserve, which we've done before.
And now we're into E1000, which is the former cash fund, capital
Yeah.
infrastructure reserve
Well,
fund.
we may have a different name, other than the everything fund.
I don't think that will be the name.
On the Red Green Show, there used to be Humphrey's Everything Store, so we could borrow on that. And we were gonna do a little rewrite of this section, right, Stan?
This, that we're working on.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna suggest that we,
wonderful idea.
I think it will incorporate everything through 1100, E1000.2.
to get that into that affordability.
And form of the budget on page 133, and we'll incorporate those pieces. E1000.3 is an amendment to the bond redemption funding that we did last year. It strikes out
What page you on?
on top of page 134.
All right.
134, okay, so the capital, everything reserve fund.
So we directly appropriated the 20 million to the treasurer to repay
Mhm.
bonds, but we tied it in the struck language there. To have the savings.
Go into that,
Yes, and so that's what's being eliminated here.
all right, so that's,
The savings,
so did those get redeemed?
we don't know the status of the
Well, didn't we
redemption.
already appropriate it?
So we've already appropriated, we're not appropriating again, we're simply striking out the notwithstanding and flow piece.
Well, why is it appearing here?
To
Because it's
that
a pri-
amendment of striking out
I
where
know,
the,
but we appropriated in the FY '23 budget or something.
we did, but we're not doing what's being struck on the top of page 134. That's what the proposal of this amendment is.
I understand, but
Yeah.
we've already appropriated the 20 million.
We've already appropriated the 20 million, it's not looking for the commissioner.
And now it's appearing in the 24 budget, so that's what I'm confused about. Should we say that the 20 million appropriated in the FY 2023?
That says that on the bottom of page 133. The intro to it is, it's an amendment.
Oh,
So sorry.
You moved me to the wrong.
I moved you,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
So that lead in is there.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
sorry, all right.
The struck language is to get away from the idea that this fund is going to be filled by foregone interest and principal payments, and we're going to fill it in another way, because as time goes on, there'd be an awful lot of foregone interest and principal payments to keep track of, and it would just be
No,
ridiculous.
Oh, no,
So
I
we're just
was,
trying to take that out and say,
I missed the paragraph
The
before. and I
actual
was like,
showing it was an
Yeah,
amendment.
all right,
Language.
so now I'm fine, okay.
And now we're to the end of the normal language section of the big bill. We have a whole F section that I'm gonna switch off with Sarah on.
Because you have to go next
This
door.
workforce and economic development.
Actually, next door got canceled, but
Oh,
this is mostly drafted by David Hall, but was the incorporation of the workforce and a little bit of economic development pieces from the House bill into the budget.
that's, okay. And I just need to, depending on how much emphasis we want to place on this, because our Economic Development Committee is going through all the proposed, and so, I don't know whether
It's worth it to actually.
it's worth it to
It's
ride
no
through.
different than the correction stuff that was in the other section. This is all new bill. It should be a bill.
No, this, we want to appropriate this money.
So this is
We did not-
basically language that goes with appropriations in another section of the bill. But if you want to wait and see what the
I
committee
think,
down the hall,
the, House passed in their workforce development section, they had some base, recommendations, and then they have, one-time money. And, the one-time, if you take out the brownfields, it's about 47 million,
49.
49, well, 49. And, I gave them a target of 40. So that's why they're gonna be reviewing, some, and, what they would recommend, if they had 40 million. If we have more, then, we can prioritize from there, but that's what they're working with, for, the amount of money available for their workforce piece. So it's sort of like the housing piece, we'll be looking at housing as a package, and then we'll be looking at the workforce. So that committee has, got that, target, and they've been taking testimony. So I'm gonna suggest really, not spending time on something that might change, and what we would spend our time on is what they recommended to us from, that other company. Which means that we would get through
The next 40 pages.
40 pages.
All from there.
And this is all related to those recommendations.
I can't tell.
Could you tell us what page we had got up to?
You got up to 134.
No,
Oh.
if we get,
So if you go all the way to the end, then we're at effective dates, I think.
Well, wait a minute, what's the Department of Corrections peer support program?
It's one of the programs that the bill on the, is recommending from the House. It's
but
a-
you may want to talk to the commissioner about that.
You also have a grant to certain fiscal members, that just came through
You're
yesterday.
getting more and more, I
Yes.
mean,
Yes, I noticed
why,
that.
what's the point of having committees? Just throw everything in the budget.
Well, last year, S11 never came to us, which turned out to be kind of a problem, Senator Sears. So
Section of the budget.
that was the economic development bill.
Right.
Well, just like economic.
Okay, I just wanted to
Senator,
bring
sorry.
it back.
Like if there isn't a dollar number, that's because they haven't decided.
So these, you're in section 1101, it'd be 1101 or for the appropriations are made. But there's a lot of cross-reference to the draft sections. That's appropriation.
It looks like there's just a lot of.
Their typical form for this.
Bunch of stuff that they don't,
Ginny wants to go back.
I just, no, I'm gonna ask Stephanie a question. So are you sending the language on pages 100 to 106 regarding the deaf and blind to
We will be,
Katie?
we will be.
Yeah,
Either
that's-
I
I
or
want to,
Bree
I
will.
just want to clarify that.
Yes, we will take it out, we will take it, they will get a Word document with that language in it.
oh my God.
What page are we on?
Well,
Page 149, they exempt from criminal and civil liability for something, and I haven't figured out what. It's BS.
oh, Tom,
Could somebody send to Peggy pages 144 to 149? So ask her to add that to our other pages. Jeez.
It's all part of the peer support program.
For injury to the participant unless the peer support specialist conduct constitutes gross negligence, recklessness, or statute.
Well, that is getting into.
That is definitely getting
into
into.
your arena.
It's gonna get a lot. Peer
Yeah.
support specialist,
This came out of Commerce.
peer support program. And
It came out of Commerce, but it was informed by recommendations from committees, and this, I believe, came from House Corrections and Institutions.
I think what we.
That's why they're experts in this.
That's why the books.
Well, I think we are seeing a budget that's developed by 150 people. Um,
They're the same people who told us Tuesday, but, you know,
Yes, well, we need enlightenment.
that we didn't know.
The one thing that I would point out, I don't know who's gonna make a note of it, I'll try to, and that's on page 150. We are putting in, well, I think we've decided we were gonna fund all 3 years to get the curriculum and that certification of the program at the
Yep.
academy. This language basically says, they are going to require the state colleges and other public and private post-secondary institutions that offer a degree program in criminal justice. They shall review and take steps necessary to standardize their curriculum. We have never told a private institution how to
They
design.
even tell Middlebury College that.
Well, or Champlain, for example.
Yeah.
I believe. So, needless to say, the independent colleges are kind of concerned about language that would prescribe their coursework.
I don't think this would be certainly an issue for the Senate Education Committee to look at.
I would be for,
Or remove it. I mean, I don't know how you have the power to tell independent, I mean, we could bribe one state colleges.
So is that beginning to say,
UVM.
well, we're looking at
Yeah, F11.
F11?
The certificate in 3D technology is something that the Vermont State Colleges wanted to have us help set up because they thought it was, it would help them with recruitment and enrollment. And they also had a startup of, this is one-time money, of 700,000, I believe, for restorative justice programming. So those two appropriations were part of their proposed request. And because one of the things that they're grappling with the transformation plan is that not only were we having to increase support, but they were committed to reducing a structural deficit by 25 million, which can be done by savings, which obviously there's been a lot of controversy around one of the proposals. But the other is getting enrollment up and having courses that will attract students and have real utility in the workforce. So that's the 3D technology was requested by them in their material. But maybe we want to just get rid of this to be prescriptive about, I don't know, you have a sense of.
to be prescriptive about the 3D technology.
Yeah, no, on
Oh,
the
no.
Vermont F11.
I mean, I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to avoid redundancy but the way they're going about it is kind of, we just don't operate that way.
I would think the colleges would want to understand. And the other problem is the date is 2024, which means that it's not even synchronized with the 3-year plan that the Criminal Justice Council is having for their development of the new curriculum.
Plus, it says that they shall review, consider, and take steps necessary to standardize curricula, but it doesn't tell them what, and there's no mechanism for doing that. It's just like, get it done.
And it doesn't.
So what do you,
So
looking at
this was all in page 484. Did they just take the whole thing and dump it in here?
what is, Yes,
Yes.
they did, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
just don't have the whole thing instead of sending it over. Okay.
Uh-huh. Well, the reason they wanted to is to avoid last year where the appropriations didn't go to the appropriations.
No, I get
So,
that,
but
but
I think maybe there's enough concern about F11 that we will move it. I think once we get into the
You may want to just sort of wholesale take the F sections out and wait, and as you go through the one-time appropriations that are related to this.
I
decide
think this
if you-
language goes out anyway.
Because there's no, there may be, there
No,
may be.
there's no appropriation.
There could be
but you
appropriation
may-
at one time.
And you will probably getting a recommendation list that may come with some language from your Senate Economic Development Committee as well. But we'll certainly take them out.
There's money coming for the 3D program.
So that's an appropriation in the B11,
Yeah.
1101
So-
section.
how many, even in the.
Reading it for 13, not 12, it's bizarre.
In 12, yeah, I was gonna say in there, we instruct them to do a full-time course for 6 weeks intensive of residential summer program. We don't dictate them the programs that they do. We might give them some money to pilot and do stuff, but
You're talking about that level of specificity?
yeah, it should. Decided that it needed to be 8 weeks.
Did the Vermont State Colleges ask?
Yes, they asked for
that
funding.
language?
They asked for
Did
the
they ask for
funding.
the language? That- no.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So
Um,
if they ask for the language, if they ask for the funding, we give them the funding, well, they're gonna do what they asked for.
But even if they ask for
And
it,
even if they
they want to change
Do we
it.
want
change
to
it,
clutter,
7
I
weeks.
know.
to change
do we
it.
want to clutter the budget with that level of prescription?
No,
Or take away any flexibility.
Right.
For the 8 weeks and not 6.
Well, that's what happens when you're that prescriptive is you don't
You have to wait for the
Yeah.
amendment process.
So, who does, is that you, higher ed?
Yes.
They'll figure it out.
I think, well, maybe I should FaceTime Catherine again by mistake.
Oh my God.
What are you looking at now?
F13.
Look at comic book for students.
House and Senate committees and jurisdictions, don't even mention what they are. Never seen that. They forgot to put in with it, so you guess which House and Senate committees you need to send the report to.
Well, that way, it gives whoever.
You know, they're watching me do this.
Yeah, we're being observed.
We're being observed. But it,
Is Advanced Vermont something new?
That is the-
Advanced Vermont is
I can't keep track of
is
all this.
booked to VSAC, but it's really a separate program.
Yeah.
You run the money.
Oh,
We have
it's
done
that-
money. to the-
It's
There's just like one person on the website.
Yes, I think so.
but they can work on what to do with the jurisdiction.
All right, well, we'll see what our education committee does. If they don't fund some of this stuff, then maybe the language goes away, but, I guess particularly the DOC, it seems like because we heard from testimony that I think that CCD has got a relationship with the Department of Corrections for staff training. And so, I guess, I don't know, Adam, how closely the various departments are looking at this bill to identify what doesn't, either it's duplicative or problematic or needs to be reworded. I mean, you're seeing us go through and sort of respond to what's here, but you might benefit from some input from the departments that are, being affected here.
In what form? Would you like a letter or would you like to call them in to testify?
No, I don't have time. I want them to review this section, if you would, and offer comments if there's something that might be a problem. And I don't know what's happening in economic development relative to some of them, but like the corrections piece, there's a lot in corrections. A lot of policy too. So does that mean we're brownfields relocating? How do we relocate? We don't have any place to put them.
Young will
I'm looking at the roads, so that's probably gonna be on the list.
Yeah, it is.
We're looking at,
Oh, how about simplifying government?
Yeah.
Is that a gap too?
what page are you on?
I'm on 172.
Oh.
But I think that would fall, I think, into the economic development arena as well.
A specialized service workforce development program on page 154.
Yeah, I think that's all theirs to look at and advise.
Simplifying those. The name. Throw out the Secretary of State out of that simplification.
Okay.
From one place and B, but they kept them in.
So Stephanie, do you think we're just about through then for what we need to do? And
Yes.
then wait until we get,
And tomorrow we can start on the base appropriations.
yeah, okay.
That will have a sort of normal feedback, something like that.
All right, so I think then we can say we've gone through, and there's no point going through stuff that's gonna be subject to change and review by the other committees until it comes back to us. Yes,
So the workforce piece, I understand, economic development has asked us to work through the sections relevant by Tuesday. They're gonna be bringing it here on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's what the deadline we told them.
But,
There's all kind, every profession is getting something.
Bobby, you have the canvas bill?
Well, parts.
So,
It's in
committee,
that
then
economic
I'm gonna suggest then,
Michelle came.
we adjourn the committee